welcome to today's webinar. We've got a very interesting topic today, which is multi-channel mayhem, which I think is going to be very apt for everyone in the audience. So I'm delighted to be joined by two regulars now for our webinar, Stephen Wright from Azzurri and Luke Talbot. And we're going to be talking through multi-channel mayhem, looking at some findings of a survey that's recently gone out, and then we'll be looking at how you can improve multi-channel, and then a discussion about multi-channel not being the same as multi-brand. We then have the chance for you to put in your top tips, if you put those into the question box, and there is a bottle of champagne for the best tip, which we'll pull out and after the webinar and announce within an hour of the webinar closing on Twitter. And then we have interactive questions and answers, live questions from the audience. But before we get going, what I'd like to do now is just share a poll with you, which new channels do you handle in the contact center? So these are looking at things like web chat, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, or comments that come up on websites. So if you'd just like to vote, you can vote on all of those that apply. And so if you'd just like to vote on those now, and we'll just have a look at the results that come up. How popular do you think, Luke, how popular do you think YouTube is likely to be in this?
Well, that's something I'm very keen to find out. I would expect it to be fairly low, probably about maybe 10 to 15%, but it should be something that's growing for sure. Right. Yeah, I think so.
Oh, right. I'm not sure if you're able to see the results on the screen, but actually that's probably not too far off.
Really? I'm not staking my reputation on it, but let's see how it goes.
Maybe my glasses are showing the reflection. Yeah, let's put the results up on the screen for everyone, and we'll share those out. So 55% web chat. That seems to be increasing every time I do a poll on web chat. That's going up. 55% Facebook as well. 47% Twitter, and actually probably the highest on those comments on websites is the one thing that is monitored. If you've got any other answers, if you want to put that into the question box, and we'll have a look at those. And 13%.
So 10 to 15% then.
13%. Rob says none of the above. So I guess that really is mayhem. So what I'd like to now do is just drill down into this a little bit and just ask you the question of how do you currently handle multi-channel? And again, tick all those that apply. So we handle everything in separate channels, separate voice, non-voice, etc. We blend all non-voice together in one team. We keep social media separate from everything else. We blend everything together into one queue, or it's a bit of mix and match. So just select all those that apply. And Stephen, do you think social media is likely to be separate or joined in? Would you say in your experience?
I think it's going to be a mix. That social media is still seen in some organisations as something that marketing should be dealing with, and then others it's something which they're putting into the contact centre, which is where I think we believe it should be. But so you're probably going to get a mixed view on that one.
Okay, well let's have a look at the look at the results now and share those up. So we've got the 38% keep everything into separate channels. Interestingly, only 9% of people blending all non-voice, which is quite a common one that I see. So I'd be interested if to know what people are doing in terms of voice. 38% are keeping social media separate. So that may be that social media is separate from the rest of the email and web chat. 9% blend everything, and quite a large mix and match. So quite a varied picture. So that'd be interesting to see how that compares, because I think you asked a similar question in your survey findings.
And it comes out very similar in terms of the 9%. So that's interesting.
Well, let's have a look at your survey findings. Delighted to introduce Stephen Wright to you, and Stephen's going to take us back through some of the findings of multi-channel survey that you've done.
Is my screen now for you?
No, just need to put that up on the screen.
Right. Good afternoon. This is Stephen Wright from the Azzurri Contact Centre practice, and together with Luke Talbot, my colleague, we're going to cover some of the findings we've had in terms of how multi-channel is being enacted in reality. I think for probably the last few years, whenever there's been a presentation on this subject, there's always been a slide which covers which channels are being adopted and which aren't. And in a sense, we're almost past that at this stage, because I think what we're finding is that all contact centres, virtually all contact centres, are now multi-channel. But what we found is they've been adding new channels as they've been going along, adding new technology in a very pragmatic way, so that when email was added, you would add a specialist technology for the email, and so forth. The issue that's coming about, though, is that as a result, many contact centres have multiple technologies for different channels. They also probably have some of those channels being handled by different departments. So the web will be handled by one department. Social media is a good example, and I think we've just seen in the in the poll we had that social media may well be handled by another group. And then you're introducing things like smartphones, which effectively cover multiple channels. You know, a smartphone can be the web, it can be voice, and it can be an SMS. So you're raising the possibility that you can link the channels in some form of process. But we are seeing as a result that there's been a number of issues. One is tracking the customer experience, understanding where the customer is. The problem is that the customer knows exactly where he is in terms of the channels. It's whether you know where they are. The other is managing resource. If agents are tied to a specific technology, it can be quite hard to allocate the resource in the way you want. And we're also finding providing a consistent experience across all these channels is very difficult. So last year, at the end of last year, we decided to just run some research to try and understand, because the issue wasn't, as we said, whether you're using multimedia, it's what you're doing about it. And what are the challenges, what's working, what isn't, and is it actually delivering results? So we held some research and got a number of senior people within contact centres really focusing on the experiences rather than what was driving them to move to the multi-channel environment. The first question was the obvious one: is multi-channel providing benefits? And no surprise, yes, because customers are using multi-channel, you'd expect them all to be getting benefits. What we did find interesting was that there was a spike in the 51 to 200 agent space where more than 9% more than the others, they were seeing more benefit. We don't have a particular reason for this, but we suspect it's because below that, having multi-channels probably stretches resources, whereas above that you tend to find it easier to silo those channels. So in the kind of 51 to 200 agents, you can probably see what's going on and get that benefit more easily in some ways than either the large or the smaller.
I guess for the large channels, there may be an element of outsourcing some of those channels.
Yes.
For instance, social media is sometimes outsourced.
Yes, exactly. You get the benefits or disadvantages depending on your view of scale, really, above that. So the next question we were interested in was really, do the vendors claim that you should be running all this on a single platform make sense? Does it really work? It doesn't really matter whether you're talking to Avaya, Cisco, Genesis, or Interactive Intelligence, or any number of suppliers. They will all be offering you a single platform to manage these technologies. So the question is, does that really produce the benefits? One thing we did find is that the market has certainly bought in, which is probably a reflection that people are getting the message that if you ask people whether they want a fully integrated system, 70% of contact centres that we asked said yes. Interestingly enough, 9% only had a fully integrated system, which reflects exactly the result of your poll, which said that 9% were fully blended. So it might be that there's that the two researchers are quite closely aligned in that sense.
It's always very good to
have that.
When they tie up.
Exactly. But so we're in the position where the market knows it wants to go into single platform, but most don't have that. And that's on the basis of the promises, which are that you get improved customer services because you can track and manage customer experience across all channels. You can manage peaks and troughs in terms of blending resources. You can potentially reduce costs. There was research a few years ago from DMG in the States suggesting that 5% of contact center costs were just taken up managing different channels. So you can lower through consolidated reporting and administrative costs. And of course, you do get much more flexibility and the improved contact center reporting. But is that a promise which comes out? Well, the indications are that actually there is some truth in that. If you look at the single versus multiple systems, what we're seeing is that satisfaction is improved across the board, but those that have implemented a single system seem to get improved satisfaction over those who are managing multiple systems, and this is probably because it's easier to manage that experience. Interestingly enough, we also found that the morale within agents, so if agent attrition is something which people are worried about, the ability to give them more varied experience and to more easily handle the management of that varied experience seems to improve the morale and makes it easier to attract agents into the contact center.
Yeah, just on that graph, in case anyone's having difficulty reading it, the left-hand one is it's easier to attract candidates, the middle one is morale has increased, and the one on the right, which I think is very fascinating, is customer service has improved.
Yeah. Sorry, there are small notes. The other two things are that, again, you can certainly track a customer experience if you've got separate systems, but it's probably more manual. Those with multiple systems, 100% said that they could track the customer journey across the channels, regardless of what channel was actually used. That's the top right-hand graph, whereas only 71% who had separate systems could do that. And there was also a reflection that there was no contact center using a single system had problems of predicting a demand. That's something which I think Luke will be talking about later. So the question is, why are people not deploying these single systems if it seemed to be providing benefits and people actually want it? One, obviously, is people aren't sure where to start. 14% suggested that. 16% thought it was expensive, which is really linked into the fact that 40% said they'd already invested in different channels. So therefore, or they'd invest in different technologies, and therefore it was hard to move to an integrated platform without throwing away the investment you've made. It does raise the question, as you add new channels, which seems to be the way things are moving, whether you should be thinking of how you can, over time, start consolidating it, because every time you use a new technology, you may find that you're finding it harder and harder to move to the point when you can have a single platform. The other areas which were running into problems was, I see the benefits, but senior management don't see it as a priority. And I think that's one of the issues. The contact center themselves, in terms of using it, can see what it would bring, but the ability to put the arguments together which can convince senior management probably has not been put there properly. And a number also are only focused on the phone, and that may reflect that the larger organizations, it's easier to stovepipe, and you will find, as Jonty suggested earlier, that you've outsourced certain channels, or that you're just dedicating one contact center to one specific channel.
What surprised me here a bit is that only 16% think it sounds expensive, so I guess it really isn't. That isn't, though I guess getting management to buy into it is it's possibly a flip side of that.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that it's getting a good ROI, I think, and underlines maybe three of those reasons. You know, the idea that you've already invested, the idea that it sounds expensive, and the idea that senior management aren't convinced, are really different shades of the same issue, really.
I guess in the current economy, even a small investment, has to be justified. So.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. So at that point, I'll hand across to Luke. Sorry, to John.
We're just going to take before we hand across. We're just going to take another poll now, and what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at which challenges do you face within multi-channel. So I'll just put the poll up on the screen for you, and just tick all that apply in here. So is it agent skills and capability? Are you finding problems with systems? Do you have difficulty with scheduling or forecasting? Do you have problems with reporting or compliance? So I'd just like to vote on that. If your challenge isn't on there, if you want to type that into the box, which will be interesting. So we'll just get the voting there. We have had a question in from Charlotte on the chat room, and if you're not on the chat room, it's callcenterhelper.com/chat, which is about how do you handle productivity in a multi-channel environment. So I don't know if Stephen or Luke, you've got any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean that is one of the key gripes of having to deal with multi-channel. I think one of the things we notice is a lot of people who don't have a multi-channel blended contact center will have all of their reporting and metrics for voice and possibly email in one system, and then other activity is being dealt with either in separate siloed systems. And when you start adding up all that time for that agent's activity, you either end up with more time than they had in the day, or you've got to start looking at not available codes and saying what time was spent doing emails or web chat, etc. So that's one of the key things that a multi-channel system can actually resolve, because all your metrics are going to be going into one data set. You'll just get your utilization for that agent covering their time in the system. So that's really one of the big things that can be helped with.
And I guess the workforce management system probably, if that can be multi-channeled, then
absolutely, yeah,
that also helps.
Yeah.
Okay, let's have a look at the poll results. So looks like actually more or less in the order we've put up on there. The highest agent skills and capabilities. I guess that phone skills and typing skills are somewhat different. Very large number of people held back by the system. So it looks like it's a real serious technology issue that people have got. Scheduling and forecasting quite difficult, which I guess is all tied in, and reporting, which is I guess tied into the question we just answered on productivity and compliance. What I'd like to now do is I'd just like to drill down on this a little bit further, and I'd just like to say, what is your single biggest challenge you face with multi-channel in the contact center? So just like to type that into the question box now. What is your biggest challenge you face with multi-channel in the call center? So just while you're typing those in, we've had the first few. Mary Law has said that she has two challenges, capacity and conversion rates. Rob has said digital exclusion and maturity of systems is a challenge. James has said forecasting. Emma, quite an interesting one here, staff resourcing, getting management to allow additional costs. Stephen, any thoughts on getting management to allow additional costs?
I think, well, getting any additional costs is always going to be a challenge, and I think this is where I think there needs to be greater understanding of what the real return is when you start doing the blending of resources, because I think it often is seen as just extra work, whereas in fact you can find that it can justify itself if it's implemented properly, but it does take a different view of how you're doing it, and thought as to how you might allocate resources across the different channels, because obviously not every agent can work on multiple channels.
Yes, there's a couple of interesting ones on getting management buy-in. Kashuka said management call in investing against other priorities in the business. James said convincing management the function belongs in the traditional contact center and not on marketing, and I know in the...
I'm guessing we're talking about social media.
Yeah, and particularly that's been one of the discussions on the chat room, is trying to get that back from marketing. Probably the most interesting one I've seen is rather than getting a whole of social media back, to say that why don't marketing own social media and we'll own the customer support part of it, and almost set up a call center helper cares type of channel for any customer care issues, and that certainly proved to be quite interesting. Suki says consistency. It seems that negative feedback on a social site has a higher severity against a negative email. I think that's probably probably true. Email tends to be fairly private, but social is certainly very common in there. Kashu has also talked about systems investment and ROI. Kirsty has said they've got no MI for some of the work types, so it's impossible to measure productivity and resource effectively. I guess that's, Stephen, that's just the classic. If you build everything into separate bits, then you're not going to get the visibility.
Yeah, I think that's it goes down to the other point that was made, was consistency across the channels. If you don't have a consistent approach to how you're doing the channels, then effectively you're going to be, each technology is going to look at it in a different way. So it has to be thought from the top down, really.
So a whole range of other rafts of things. Educating up, says Michelle. Unified case management, says Paul. Skill and mindset, says Julia. Persuading marketing to let go of social media, says Dan. Demand management, i.e. keeping control of different flows, and that can be hot on one channel and quieter on another. Time and resources away from traditional channels. So I guess if it's all hell's breaking loose on the phones, it's quite difficult to necessarily get to the other ones. DPA compliance in social space. I'm not sure.
Yeah, so it's obviously Data Protection Act. So it's and that's a very interesting one, because the internet is full of examples of people pretending to be people they're not.
Yes.
And it's very easy to set up an identity on Facebook, Twitter, wherever you want with somebody else's name. So that's a very good point, and that's why we see a lot of social media interactions very quickly turn into private one-to-one interactions. There's a lot of media switching as well, where something might turn into an email interaction or possibly even a phone call off the back of something that if it starts to get personal, you may not want to talk to somebody through Facebook.
Yeah, and we have measuring sentiment effectively across the different channels is another comment that's come in. And the last one on the chat room is that James says biggest challenge, multi-channel call center, the underlying foundational data capabilities. It underpins almost everything and rarely remedies through tactical enhancements. So I guess the sticking plaster will only take you so far. Well, we're now going to go across to Luke Talbot from Azzurri, who's going to have a look at what we can do to improve the multi-channel and the ways that we can make things better. So just pass the baton across to Luke. And Luke, if you'd like to take us through your presentation, that would be great.
Thank you, Jonty. Okay, so yeah, thanks for that. I'll follow on pretty much from where Stephen left off. So we're going to imagine that the multi-channel blended contact center is the right way forwards, and certainly that's what the data suggests. We've been doing multi-channel contact centers for 10 years, so that's what our experience tells us as well. But it's very much it's a bit like a bit of a holy grail. The holy grail was to get this multi-channel blended contact center system. Everyone was telling you that it was going to solve everything, and then you got it, and you find out it's effectively just a cup. It's a very pretty looking cup, and maybe it's got some extra features over the other cups you've got in your cupboard. But it's really, if you don't use it appropriately, then it will be nothing more than that. So actually, what we see is we see a lot of people who take their contact center, they blend it, it turns something that was meant to be very, very complicated into something that should be very, very simple and allow you to do better resource management, give you better data. But are you really getting any more out of your contact center than you were before you went through this blending exercise? And really that's what I'm going to look at now. I've got a few points that we're going to go through, a few things that we need to look at in contact centers that go through this exercise to improve how things go. So there's this isn't the BBC, so I haven't obfuscated the brand on the blender. Sorry about that. So okay, so it gets worse here actually as well. So some things to think about. The obvious one is skill blending. The main attraction for a lot of people to a blended contact center, to a multi-channel contact center, is the fact that you can skill blend. You can allocate all these different task types to pretty much anyone who's logged in. As long as they're skilled appropriately, as long as you've trained them, as long as they know that this is going to happen. But what we often find is, we buy these amazing appliances, as some of you may have these in your kitchen, and you were told that this was the way forwards, and that you had to blend your own coffee beans, and that you had to, buy a blender to make smoothies, but then you just buy these. And so you're doing what you've always done, even though you've got the equipment to do it yourself. And so what we need to look to do in the contact center is not just continue with the siloed mentality, but with blending technology, but make sure we really start to take advantage of the blending technology, of skill blending.
So is there an off-the-shelf blending that you can
well,
buy?
Nice. There is, yes. We're not going to do much product placement here, but so any good multi-channel contact center solution should be able to should give you the capability to do skill blending. But because by its very nature it's going to let you skill things as you want, you could also make it work like your traditional contact center used to. So it will do what you tell it to do. So what we look at is really how to reactively and proactively configure systems to make sure that you're with as little effort as possible you're getting the most out of it. And proactive would mean you've gone in, you've looked at your resource planning, and you can work out, okay, who needs to be skilled here, who needs to be skilled there, so that you rarely need to touch the system. You know it gets busy at certain times, and based on certain triggers and thresholds of queue activity, people will have the skill to do other work. And typically what that will do is that will let people deal with non-real-time activity such as emails and SMS, etc., when there aren't many calls coming through, and that will be completely automated. And when we talk about reactive, it's very important to have a system that will let you react to bad situations immediately. So you can go in and just by dragging and dropping or selecting a quick option or ticking a skill change, you can make everyone voice only or everyone email only, which I've never seen that happen, but you need to be able to control things in real time without users being able to log off and on again. I saw a couple of comments in the forum. One person mentioned that they have they dedicate voice and non-voice time to their agents, which is effectively what we sometimes call management by shouting, which is can you log into this system please, and can you log into that system, and if it suddenly goes crazy on voice, we log into the other system, and the blended system will help you avoid that situation entirely. So the next thing that we'd look at, which really leads off the back of that, is prioritization. So how do you make sure in a multi-channel world that things are being dealt with appropriately? So you've got all these roads, all these channels merging into one central point where they used to go into separate siloed systems, and you need to make sure that actually the high priority ones go to the right people at the right time, and if there's a low priority one, that actually it's allowed to run a little bit slower. And we've got good examples of this in traffic. There's a screenshot on the picture on the right there showing how ineffectively people use lanes in the UK. And on the left-hand side there, that's the infamous M42, where you have a hard shoulder that you can use when it's really, really busy. And with prioritization, what we look to do in the contact center is make sure that you appropriately have low, high, medium priorities, but you've also got some dynamic escalation as well. So for instance, your emails may be pretty low priority. They're never going to be, when they first come in, higher priorities than a call that's queuing. However, increasingly, emails are becoming real time, so people are expecting a response very, very quickly. So you need an SLA. That SLA is going down all the time. It used to maybe be a day, and then it was 4 hours. Now increasingly we're seeing 1 hour SLAs on email. And so you need to make sure that when you approach that SLA, it actually becomes very high priority. So you need to be able to manage these things in real time. And the blended contact center should be doing this automatically for you.
And that's certainly one of the comments we've had coming back. One of the challenges is actually trying to meet the expected response times. Yeah. And with the other channels, people are increasingly expecting you to be open 24 hours a day. Yeah. Whereas you might on the phone, except that things are closed.
Absolutely, and that's it, a lot of it is expectation management as well. One of the things that you don't have an in-queue experience on email, but what you can do is you can send automated emails out saying, thank you for your email, the contact center is now closed, and we open again at 8 o'clock in the morning, so giving them a good expectation, but also maybe making sure that your priority isn't escalating for those emails overnight. So if it is escalating priorities, it's not doing it when the customer emails you at 2 in the morning. Otherwise you get in at 9 and everyone just answers emails because they're the highest priority tasks. So this needs careful management and adjustment, but when it's done properly, you can have an incredibly effective solution. The next thing is multiple concurrent tasks. Now, the screenshot there is actually taken from a website called platespinning.com, which I guess just goes to show that you can really get anything you want on the internet nowadays. But the concept here of dealing with multiple things at the same time, humans literally cannot do two things at the same time. I think it's scientifically proven that people who say they do aren't doing two things effectively. They're just doing two things quite poorly. However, there are some media types that would lend themselves to being able to be done concurrently, or so-called concurrently, and web chat is the obvious target. There's some inefficiency in dealing with real-time web chat in that the customer may not be 100% committed to the conversation. The customer might need to go away and check something, and these things mean that there can be quite large delays between conversations. However, it's not as simple as saying, when I do web chat, I want 6 at the same time, because actually a web chat conversation with one particular customer might be a very engaged conversation, and the customer might be talking to you, and any delay you have because you're dealing with another web chat might put them off quite a lot. So web chat is a real-time communications channel, and dealing with multiple web chats is obviously something that needs to be done quite cautiously. It's pretty much the only channel that we've ever seen where people need to be able to do more than one at the same time. So email, certainly not the case. You're dedicated to the email. Voice calls, clearly not. But even things like SMS, etc., you wouldn't do more than one at the same time. It's interactions, really. But so web chat is definitely one where you'd need to look at that, but with some caution. So task interruption. This is where we see people dealing with a message task. So when we're blending things into the multi-channel contact center, you're going to have real-time communication and non-real-time. And with your real-time communication, so your calls, you clearly can't interrupt it. With web chat, you can give people multiple things, but you're not really interrupting the web chat conversation. You're just, managing two at the same time. But with an email, you can logically interrupt an email. If a high priority call comes in, going back to the prioritization thing we were talking about earlier, and it's higher priorities than the email you're dealing with, then actually there's nothing wrong with saying to the user, can you deal with this call right now? And that's like in the old days when we weren't managing email in the contact center, but people were still doing emails, they would just keep getting calls through the phone. So they would be dealing with an email and the phone would ring, they'd pick it up. What we need to do in a multi-channel contact center is manage that. So you're not just sending calls to somebody when they're on emails, you're interrupting them, putting the email to one side logically in the contact center, and then going back to the email when the call ends. And that means that going back to our resourcing thing and our utilization, you've still got your 8 hours for that agent and not 8 hours and 56 minutes because they were doing emails and calls at the same time. And for anyone who's interested, Google Kanye West Taylor Swift interruption to see what that screenshot's all about. Okay, so multimodal interactions. We're seeing this increasingly in the contact center, and this is where you've got certain interactions that turn into other types of interactions. And we mentioned earlier the social media thing. So how do we deal with the Data Protection Act? How do we verify that somebody is who they say they are? And that's certainly something that people tend not to worry too much about with email for some reason. But it's certainly true, and you do get a lot of emails that turn into calls, a lot of calls that turn into emails, etc. And being able to structure those and create links between them is quite useful. But there need to be rules. So you need to know what you can turn into a call, what you cannot turn into a call, and importantly, you need to be able to report on it. You don't want to do your agent utilization at the end of the day and the agent say, well, actually I wasn't unavailable for 45 minutes. I was on a call, but because it was after that email, it doesn't show as time in my system. So you need to be able to configure things so that you're showing all of that time. And that's something that we're seeing people doing increasingly in contact centers, but obviously we can help work through that. Okay, and context switching. Whenever we talk about multi-channel contact centers, we need to talk about how quickly you're going to be flipping between different media types. There was a comment earlier on the forum, I can't remember exactly who said it, but that they were probably too small to do full blending, but also too small to be able to silo everything. And it's almost as if you're stuck in this no man's land of not being able to blend effectively, but also not being able to silo things into grouped activities. And that, unfortunately, can be the case with certain size contact centers, because if you've got very high priority work and it's all going through into one system, the real answer is you don't have enough people to deal with it. What you don't want is people who are just flipping incessantly between email and calls and SMS and web chat because they don't know whether they're coming or going, they can't get any kind of rhythm up, and it can quite quickly turn into rage. And so what you need to manage is the prioritization of your task allocation. And what we mean by that is, if I'm dealing with web chat, for instance, actually I'm probably still going to deal with web chat afterwards. I don't want to just go straight into voice. So can I change my skills and change my prioritization so that I make sure that I'm primarily web chat and I'm just helping out on voice when it gets really, really busy, and not just somebody with blanket skills in everything who's just flipping between every media type.
And I guess there's always a challenge with web chat that if you've got, say, 3 web chats open, you actually type the right answer into the wrong person.
Yes.
Which can be, if you're in a sensitive type business, may not be terribly appropriate.
And I guess maybe slightly flippantly, but if you're switching between Twitter interactions and SMS with 140 character limit, and suddenly you went into an email interaction and took the same mentality with you, you'd be typing in text speak to typing in text speak in a formal email. But so there are issues, and one of them is agents are throwing their computers out of the window.
Yeah.
Okay, so all media aren't equal. So one of the common misconceptions is, right, I've got everything in a multi-channel system. Now I can just allocate everything to everybody and apply the same rules, and everything's going to work. And that's not true at all. So with calls, you've got a particular characteristic. We can maybe turn calls into callbacks, and we can do outbound calls, but really the nature of a call is always going to be identical. It's going to ring for a certain amount of time, it's going to connect, you're going to talk, you're going to disconnect, you'll be in after call work. With emails, again, it's different. You would never deal with 2 at the same time, as with calls, but you may get interrupted. You may need to park an email for later. You may need an email to go into a much higher priority queue because they've previously emailed you, and this is a follow-on. So all these things are true, and the increasingly tight SLAs, although we have to deal with emails much more quickly, they will never hang up. So we do have a little bit of leeway in our prioritization there. With web chat, you've even got lower patience than voice. That's certainly what we find. So somebody on a call queue is getting treatment in the queue. They're getting messages, music, announcements, the option to call back, that sort of thing. But somebody on a web chat has clicked on a link to say, hey, chat with us now. If you're not on it within about 10, 15 seconds, that person might navigate away from the page, go and buy their insurance elsewhere, do any number of things. So really you need to be able to handle that. But web chat uniquely is one of the channels where you can deal with more than one at the same time. And SMS also will never abandon, but they can become very stale. So sending someone a reply to an SMS a week later is going to be completely meaningless to them. So blending can help also soften peaks. This is resource depending, but what it will let you do is with peak queue management and skill blending, it will let you soften those peaks in your contact center where you've got natural peaks and troughs between different teams. One of the questions earlier was it's difficult to get sign-off on additional resource. You may not need additional resource. This is the thing that a multi-channel contact center might help you do. So finally, I just wanted to go through a very, very quick analysis of where this is all going, because all these media types, every single one of them has been around for the last 8, 9, 10 years, and we've been doing this for that amount of time. And it's now just reaching the point where I think it's completely normal to have a blended contact center rather than quite exceptional. But things are changing, and social media is something that everyone keeps talking about. But actually, just to think about it slightly differently, the question here is when is a chat an email, when is an email a chat, when's it a video call, a message board forum, that sort of thing. And the answer really is right now. It's not really a revolution more than a quiet evolution that's going to take us all by surprise, where the channels that we're using online to manage our social interactions with our friends, to manage our emails, to have web chat conversations, all these sorts of things are all merging. And really, we've been talking about social media for a while, we're talking about multi-channel for a while, but actually social media may become a little bit of a misnomer very quickly. The first screenshot on the left, that's Facebook. So you can see in Facebook, if you send a real-time message and somebody is online at the time, it turns into a web chat. If that person is not there, it turns into a message, which is effectively an email. People on Facebook have Facebook email addresses now. So very quickly, you'll see a whole generation of people who simply don't have an email address other than their Facebook one, maybe. And depending on when you're talking to them, that will be a web chat or an email. Turn it into a video call if you want, and possibly even a voice call. The same with Google+, which is the screenshot in the middle. A lot of people manage their email through Gmail, and now you're getting that real-time chat interaction, the video part, and the social aspect as well, which allows you to share this with all of your friends. So let's imagine this conversation goes really badly. I could just add loads and loads of people to this. I could add all my circles of friends to it. And on the right-hand side there, we can see Microsoft desperately trying to catch up with Outlook.com. But actually, they've got a really good story. They've got millions and millions of users who used to be in Hotmail, who've migrated to Outlook, and now they're adding Skype to it, so they're very quickly going to have that functionality. Now, the key thing here is it's quite easy to look at this and say it doesn't really matter, but we can see here the three big players in social interaction are all adopting exactly the same strategy, and this is very quickly going to be the way that people are used to communicating with each other. So we're not going to be talking about social media, we may not even be talking about email, SMS, etc. We're simply going to be talking about contact. And that contact switching, the multimodal interactions that we had before, people are going from email to chat to all these things, is just going to become absolutely normal. Anyway, that's me.
Thank you very much for that. We're now going to go to another poll and going to ask the question, what do you feel is driving the adoption of multi-channel? So the answers that we have, again, vote for all that apply. The customer interaction strategy, competition from other businesses, demand from the customer base, the rise of social media, or if you've got anything else, put those into the question box there. So some quite interesting answers that I think we're going to get coming back from here. My guess is that demand from customer base is going to be.
I'm kind of hoping that the demand from the customer base and the customer interaction strategy is going to be very high. I have an inkling that the rise of social media is causing a lot of people to think about multi-channel. I don't think there's a clear winner in these.
Yeah, Kim has said that employee developmental needs are potentially a factor within that. So let's just have a quick look at the results of that poll, share that with everyone. So yeah, demand from the customer base is the largest. The customer interaction strategy is also driving it. Strange enough, competition from other businesses is not the underlying, it's not competition driving it. I guess it's just customers driving it, and the rise of social media. So quite an interesting one there. So that's quite interesting. Don't forget that if you want to put your tips into the question box, now is probably quite a good time to do it. We've only had a fairly small number of tips today, loads and loads of questions. So if you want to put those in, you've got a pretty good chance of winning that bottle of champagne. So I'd just like to hand over the last of our short presentations from Stephen Wright from Azzurri, who's going to argue the case that multi-channel is not the same as multi-brand. So Stephen, if you'd like to take us away. And we've also had a comment back about resourcing and headcount optimization is also driving the discussion as well.
Right. Okay. I'm just going to finish off with one slide, really, just to point out some of the implications of using multi-channel in terms of the brand. And I think there's a number of issues here. There was interesting research I saw recently which showed that if someone doesn't finish off a transaction one channel, where do they go to? And inevitably, a lot of call centers get calls from people who fail to get something working on the web or fail to get a transaction from another channel. And the interesting thing there is that they're coming to the call center quite well educated about you. They've seen what you're saying on the web, so they're not coming brand new when they're dealing with you in an interaction. So there's a real need to make sure that you've got consistent information across all the channels. So if, for instance, you're putting a special deal on the web, even if it's designed to encourage people to use the web and not you go to the call center still has to know about it, because there's a good chance customers will find it doesn't work or will want to ask questions about it. So there's a real need to make sure that the information that you answer in terms of one channel is the other. And a good example would be in social media. If someone asks a question on Facebook, will they get the same answer if they send an email in? And that's one good reason, I think, why you need to think about having the social media under one part of the organization, just to get the consistency of the information which you provide to them. The other is to make sure that, having got the information, that there's brand consistency. It really isn't enough to provide the same information. It has to be provided in the same way. The SLAs have to be consistent. So, you know, if you're offering good service by having high levels of SLAs, and then you find that one of the channels just consistently is delayed, or you don't respond quickly, then you can undermine your brand. Or if maybe the tone is different, the people you put in charge of the social media site, you put in charge because if effectively they fitted a certain type, you've still got to make sure that the way they answer, the kind of approach they take to answering their customers fits within the brand of the organization. And it is quite easy to find yourself having diverse types of responses and diverse levels of responses. So there are tools out there, there are knowledge management tools which can make it easy to provide that kind of consistency, but you need to think of it up front. And again, given the comments we've had, I do think it is one of the reasons why social media should really be in the contact center. I think most marketeers see social media as a PR disaster waiting to happen, which is why they want to have control. And there is some truth in that you don't want a real escalation happening in some contact center agent trying to answer something which is going viral. But there are tools, again, which you can make sure that when something reaches a certain level, it gets put through to the PR department rather than the contact center. But the run-of-the-mill consistent interactions should be handled in a consistent way, and that's what contact centers are really designed to do. So I'll really just give you a summary of the findings that we discussed at the beginning of the webinar. The question is how you manage multi-channel, not if. I think all the comments we've had show that that's the case. Everyone really is now doing multi-channel. You don't really need to have slides which show you what's been used and what's not, because everyone seems to be going down that road. You may be, for various reasons, behind the curve or ahead of the curve, but you're on the curve, if you like. You're moving in that direction. But additional channels do add complexity, and I think you need to think that if you're going to add complexity, do you really want to add a new silo, or do you want to start sorting out the problem? Because there will be other channels, as Lucas has intimated. There's different ways of doing communication coming down the line. So the more you go down the silo route, the more you'll have a battle to bring it back. So you need to think about that. You need to manage cross-channel dynamics, and technology is only one aspect. I think Luke again covered that well. Technology covers some things. It's really about how you manage the technology, but also how you manage the agents and what you want the agents to do and what's really possible. The market does want integrated technology. That seems to be recognized, but there are real barriers, and I think there is a real look to look at your contact center and understand where the savings are. As there's real savings to be made in blended. There's real savings to be made in reporting. Every time you go into a contact center, it's amazing how much time and resources is wasted with people just creating reports from multiple sources. It's a very costly thing to do. If you actually go through all the supervisors, etc., the time they're spending, when a lot of that can be brought together more.
Yeah, and it strikes me almost, sort of that the return on investment argument is one that I think a lot of people are struggling with. So maybe that, Call Center Helper, we need to publish an article on, how to calculate that return on investment.
Yes.
That may be of use to people.
Yeah. So I guess that's just the end point, which is I think there are benefits to an integrated platform are real, and that's the point I think we'd like to leave you with, and I'll pass you back to Jonty.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Stephen. So I think there's certainly some food for thought. I was quite struck by the difference between the people who want to have an integrated technology and the people who actually have it. And so there's a sort of probably a big technology gap as I've seen for any area in a couple of years now, and the problem doesn't seem to be going away. So thank you very much for that. We're now just going to go back and we're going to have a look at the top tips. So it's now your turn for top tips for handling multi-channel in the contact center. Before we dive into that, I just wanted to share this comment sent in by Dan earlier, which is marketing departments want ownership of social media, but not ownership of responding to negative feedback or complaints, creating a disconnect. I thought that is such a true statement.
That's very true. I think the analogy is it's like somebody going in and telling everybody what to do and then just running away and not listening to what everybody says about it. So if you go onto any Facebook page for a company and look at what people put up as marketing, see the comments that aren't being answered, and you find that's very, very true.
So we've got a number of questions that are coming through. I won't go through these at this stage, but there are a couple of ones that have come in on the chat room, and if you're not logged into the chat room, callcenterhelper.com/chat. Kim said, are you aware of any organizations which use a single team to switch between phone and social channels? So if anyone in the audience has got an answer to that, if you'd like to share that on the chat room. And Neil is also interested in what types of multi-channel systems do people have. So if people, we'll come back to those in a short while. But there's a couple of ones there that I think are good, what I call ask the audience questions. So here's some tips. Mary Law has said, start with web chat, a good way to reach younger customer segments, and it's got promising conversion rates. Don't forget, though, the importance of change management when that comes through. I think it's quite an interesting one. And Joanne has said, be clever with your auto-replies to ensure customers feel valued and a priority while advising realistic timescales and fulfill responses. One of the troubles I've seen with auto-replies, though, and I don't know if, Luke, you've seen this, there's a tendency to, oh, we've got an auto-reply, so let's just bang that one out, particularly on email, rather than actually necessarily solving the problem, and often stuff that people would find on the website anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's two things with auto-replies. You can just send out an auto-reply to manage expectations, which for email is really, really important because that's your version. That's your email equivalent to the music in the queue, the music on hold that's telling you your call's important. And it's really important that has, some element of information in that's going to manage that expectation, going back to the previous comment as well. And that's got to tell you the opening times, it's got to tell you the SLA, that sort of thing. But there's also automation. So you can automate emails and actually go one step further. So going back to what you said, it might be information they can find on the website, but a lot of email content, people who start dealing with emails, it might be 80% of what they do, in fact. You make 80% of contact centers tend to handle email. A lot of it can be automated. A lot of it's very simple questions. It's just repetitive stuff. And you can automate all of that using the right technology. So it's not just when you have your multi-channel strategy to say, we want all these emails now to go to the people who handle calls, because you will simply need more agents. Yeah. It's to say, actually, we want all these emails to go to the contact center, but I'd like to automate a significant proportion of them.
And actually looking at the responses that are going back, it's dynamite for frequently asked questions. You've actually got the question, you've got the response. And you can populate that on the website or into your auto response.
And that goes back to what Stephen was saying. If none of this is going into, if you've got web chat, social media, email, voice, if nothing's going into a central knowledge base, then at some point you're missing a trick.
So James has said, break down each channel to forecast and then combine after for total contact center forecast. So I guess that's quite appropriate. Though I don't know how that ties in if you're doing a blended approach. Joanna said, analyze what the customers are saying first. What are the expectations for interacting with you and how they move through the channels and preferences, then define your multi-channel center from that. Yeah. Certainly, I see a big, in terms of expectations, email seems to be a channel where we're not, as an industry, particularly good at managing expectations in terms of time.
And it's the most frequently dealt with as well. Yeah. Email is, after voice, the channel of choice for pretty much everybody. So. Yeah.
But the other point on that, I think is important, is that no two companies' multi-channel strategy will be the same because the dynamics of the customers will be different. I think that was the point that's being made. Yeah. Look and see what your customers want.
And Rob has said integrating the back office service processes before you go multi-channel to streamline the end-to-end customer experience. So it's not, Stephen, I guess it's not just about the contact center.
No, I mean, I think the when you look at how you actually optimize the interaction flow, often it's about getting information from other sources, and that's a key part of any contact center design. So,
and just to add to that one, actually, integrating the back office processes and so you can streamline the multi-channel world, actually is something else, digging a little bit deeper. If the data that you're using to route all of your interactions, be they email, web chat, voice, is coming from the same source and that is integrated, then you can define quite a good strategy for customer contacting you. Let's say, for instance, a customer emails you, you send a very long-winded reply that answers very succinctly what they want, but they say, actually, I don't understand that, I'm going to call. If you can get that call to go to the person who sent the email automatically, then you've won on both counts. You're dealing with the same person, you get that single point of contact, and you get that first contact resolution.
Yeah. And interesting one from Kim, ensure you recognize the communication skills you need on social channels, as it's not the same as the telephone. I know that people get very wound up if you haven't got very good grammar or spelling skills, certainly on the email channel. It's a little bit more relaxed on web chat. But
yeah, and interestingly, I think it's something that came out in a lot of you may have seen the call center earlier this week. There was a very interesting part where one of the agents said she adjusted her voice when she was speaking with customers, so she pronounced things in what she felt was a more sort of a partial, proper way. And I think people find they do the same thing in written communication as well. So.
So understanding what proportion of your customer base is likely to adopt other channels other than voice is vital, as it influences how much your business needs to invest on technology and infrastructure, and ensure I think we've covered that one. Setting up examples or templates for agent is a good idea. That helps to ensure they're consistent on instant media types such as web chat and Facebook, where I guess some of the speed of getting the response back is quite important. So I think we've had a look at these two. I think this discussion will probably going on in the chat room on those. Tana said, are others finding that blending agent skills is having a massive impact on how they recruit and how they induct? And I guess this, Stephen, is a bit similar to what we were talking about with spelling skills and so on. That you need to probably get that multi-blended.
Yeah. Well, by definition, you've widened the skill set you're requiring of someone, so it's going to be that bit harder to find. I think what we also found, though, was that it's easy to retain people once they are set up, so it kind of has a two-edged sword on that.
I think it's important, though, just a small point on that. Having a blended contact center, having cross-skilled agents is really, really important, but it's also incredibly important not to alienate your exceptional agents who are very single channel focused. There will be people who are just excellent on the phones and will always be excellent on the phones, and who simply don't, even if they would be excellent on multi-channel, they simply don't want to. And I think that's, there has to be room for both.
And we've had a question on the chat room from Emma saying, has there been any research done on which channels screen's gone there, on which channels customers prefer to access that she can access? So I don't know if you're aware of any research.
So there's some research that I believe was published by Avaya that was done with Forrester, I think, a year or two ago. I think it's 2011 research that showed the propagation of or the distribution of multi-channel and actually what people preferred to use. And that was quite interesting. It was quite telling. In fact, one of the things it did reveal, if I recall, I have to look back at it to know exactly, was that a lot of people were being pushed down automation, a lot of people were being pushed down IVRs, but didn't want to be. So when you actually looked at what they would rather deal with the customer with, actually phone call was predominant, a massive proportion of people wanted to handle through phone calls. But so it's not exactly up-to-date research. I think it has been done at least by that report before.
Right. But well, if you could dig out those details, we'll put that up on the website. Might be I'm not sure we'll be up. That will be this afternoon, but we certainly hope we get that on by tomorrow. And then it looks like Emma's asked another question, which is good. Ask the audience, what KPIs do you use for customer support? Because I guess the KPIs probably vary quite significantly across the different channels, and their response time certainly do. Have you seen much difference in apart from the sort of the 80-20, the timing ones?
Yeah, the 80-20, the SLAs obviously, so that's not really a KPI that the agent can relate to, but I think one of the difficult ones to manage is your sales KPI. Making a sale on Facebook is probably less likely than making a sale over the phone. So I think this does have, if you were to adopt multi-channel wholesale, then your sales KPI is definitely going to have to change.
And I guess it's to do with influence and so forth. Well, that's all we've got time for this week. I'm